Hello and welcome back as we gather together for our devotion time. Today I will be reading out of the book, The Way Back to Mayberry. Today's title is First Law of Friendship, and the episode we will be talking about is The Case of the Punch in the Nose. Today's scripture comes from Romans chapter 15, verses 1 and 2 and verse 7. We who are strong ought to bear with the failings of the weak and not to please ourselves. Each of us should please his neighbor for his good, to build him up. Accept one another, then just as Christ accepted you, in order to bring praise to God. As Americans, few things upset us more than feeling that our rights have been violated. In this day and age, we value our personal rights. We have a long and proud history of defending and preserving our freedom and our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I am not knocking this great heritage, but I wonder if it is possible to take the attitude of personal rights too far. Can we be so consumed with ourselves and our rights that we become blind to everything else around us? In the episode, The Case of the Punch in the Nose, Andy and Barney are going through some old files at the courthouse. As they often do, Andy and Barney are humming an old spiritual as they pass the time away. Sinners lose all their guilty stains. Andy reminds Barney after he questions the name of the song. As they continue their work, Barney comes across a file, an assault case between Floyd the barber and Charlie Foley, who runs the local grocery. Andy and Barney can't believe that two men as gentle as Floyd and Mr. Foley would actually be involved in an assault case, but it's all there in black and white. All there except for how the case was resolved. Barney is immediately curious and states that it is their duty as law officers to investigate, since the principals in the case are still living in Mayberry. Andy reminds Barney that the case is almost 20 years old, and he doesn't see the wisdom in reopening a case that happened so long ago. As you can imagine, Barney will not be denied. He marches down to the barber shop to get the story from Floyd. Floyd, however, is much more concerned with an article in today's newspaper than he is about an incident that happened 20 years ago. After Barney is unsuccessful at getting any information from Floyd, he visits Mr. Foley down at the market. Mr. Foley fondly remembers the story. It seems that Floyd and Mr. Foley had gotten into an argument over the price of a shave. One thing led to another, and Mr. Foley claims that Floyd punched him in the nose. Mr. Foley has a good laugh remembering the story, but Barney doesn't see the humor. Back at the barber shop, Floyd's memory makes a dramatic recovery upon hearing Foley's account of the story. Floyd now claims that it was Foley who had done the punching. A few minutes later, Mr. Foley and Goober arrive at the barber shop. Floyd and Mr. Foley have more words, and Floyd punches Foley in the nose. The war is on again, but this time it doesn't stop with Floyd and Mr. Foley. News of the feud spreads, and before you know it, the whole town of Mayberry is involved. People are punching each other in the nose without even knowing why. The lines have been drawn. You are either in Floyd's camp or Foley's camp. There is no in between. Even Opie and his young friend Johnny Paul get involved in the battle. Finally, Andy has had enough. He calls Floyd and Mr. Foley to the courthouse and is determined to work this out before any more damage is done. After he gets rid of Barney, who started the whole ruckus in the first place, Andy has a serious discussion with Floyd and Mr. Foley. Obviously, the two have been acting like spoiled kids, but the issue goes much deeper than that. You see, Floyd and Mr. Foley have been friends and neighbors for years. They have helped each other and seen each other through a lot of hard times in the past. And here they are acting like enemies just because they had a disagreement about a quarter shave 20 years ago. Andy emphasizes the rarity and the value of old friends and reminds them of the first law of friendship, which in Andy's words is to be ready to forgive. When Floyd and Mr. Foley cool off and think about the situation, they both realize how ridiculous their behavior has been. Andy suggests that nothing has been done that a warm handshake won't fix. Floyd remembers Sheriff Poindexter told them the same thing 20 years ago. And Andy asks, if it worked then, why not give it a try now? Floyd and Mr. Foley consider it for just a moment before enthusiastically shaking hands. This story turned out well. But how many similar stories might not end so well because Andy is not there to remind us of that first law of friendship, forgiveness. When you stop and think about what causes us not to forgive each other, several things come to mind. Pride, stubbornness, selfishness, anger, and hurt feelings all can preoccupy us. Floyd and Mr. Foley were ready to end a lifetime of friendship. And for what? An argument about a quarter? We can laugh at the situation, but consider our lives and relationships. It is so easy for us to get all up in arms because we think our rights have been trampled, that we have been wronged, and we're not going to rest until our side of the story is heard. This kind of attitude destroys unity, and we can see by the example in the episode that the attitude is contagious. People were fighting each other without even knowing the real issue. The case of Floyd and Mr. Foley can teach us two important lessons: how to deal with pride and how to put on humility. Both men were so concerned about their side of the story that they didn't care about anything else. They obviously didn't consider the silliness of the issue, but more importantly, they didn't care about the damage they were doing to each other and to the town. It's easy to get caught up in defending an issue, whether it is personal, professional, or even spiritual. We will always have differences of opinions with our families, at work, and at church. But what is the wisdom of defending a point to the detriment of everything else? Chances are we will end up like the people in the town of Mayberry, everybody fighting but no one knowing why. Eventually, Floyd and Mr. Foley realized the seriousness of the issue and made amends. They realized what the preservation of their friendship was much more important than touting their side of the story. If we can learn Andy's first law of friendship, to be ready to forgive, maybe we can also put the concept of our rights in the proper perspective. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you next time.